Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be addressing the first-time gun owners. Right now in America, we have probably more than any time ever in the history of America. However, this video really kind of should be timeless. So if you're watching this 5 years from now, as opposed to the day I put it out, really all the info should still be relevant. So basically what I want to walk you guys through is if you are a new gun owner and you just purchased a pistol or a revolver, kind of the things you should know, right? So unfortunately, in the gun industry, a lot of times when you ask for help, people will scoff at new folks and not give them the advice that they probably deserve. I want to welcome everybody into our gun community. You're welcome here, and we're going to kind of walk you through it. I didn't grow up with firearms, so I had to learn this through friends that helped me out as well. And now I shoot constantly and own lots of guns. So that could be you one day. All right, so first thing to go over is going to be the 4 universal safety rules. You guys can see them here on your screen. They're all important. A failure to observe any of them can lead to serious bodily harm and or death. However, again, I've been doing this for a while. I've taught sometimes. I've gone to a lot of classes. I've been around large groups of people shooting, and I've observed a lot of what you'll hear referred to as NDs or ADs, and that stands for negligent discharge or accidental discharge. So basically, a gun going off when the person holding it didn't intend for it to go off. That would be a negligent discharge. Most folks would say an accidental discharge is when there's a mechanical failure of the firearm. That almost never happens. Like, of all the accidental firings or unintended firings, let's say, I would say that 99.9% of them are negligent discharges, basically where someone fails to follow one of the 4 safety rules. And the number one reason of those 4, without question, is folks putting their finger on the trigger when they're not intending to fire the gun. It's very common. New shooters, this is a hard habit for you guys to break. But you have to be very diligent about keeping your finger off that trigger. So there is the 4 basic safety rules. There are videos on just that you guys can check out where they really go into detail on them and why they're important, but I want to cover those and then kind of walk you through the new item that you purchase. So in terms of components of the firearm itself, we have a few examples here. There's other examples out there, but I tried to pick the main types that you guys are going to encounter and that you probably have if you just purchased one. So definitely the most common handgun anyway in America right now is a semi-automatic, which this one is here. And what that means when I say semi-automatic, it means that every time you press the trigger, a round will fire until you are out of ammunition. So this is a Glock 17, however, there are many like it. So basic components of the firearms is the sights. This is our front sight, rear sight. This is our slide. So the slide itself, as the name implies, slides back and forth on the top of the firearm. We have our barrel there. This is our trigger guard. This is basically all of this down here is what's called the frame on the firearm. And then we have a portion up front. Not all guns have this. You'll see some without it. But this is where you can mount accessories like lights, lasers, those sorts of things. And then here we have our slide lock and slide stop. And I'll explain that here in a second as well. Then we also have our magazine release and then our magazine. So basically, we'll take those apart. So your magazine release, it can be sometimes on the heel down here, but most of them are going to be right here. Some of them are on both sides, but typically they're going to come just like this. This is our magazine. This particular one has 17 rounds in it, and you can see there's no ammunition in it. So we're going to set that to the side. And so the basic function of it is that as you are firing the gun, a round will fire, the momentum from it will drive the slide back, it will come forward, pick up another round out of the magazine and rechamber it. When I say rechamber, it means the round goes into the chamber, which is the part of the barrel that it sits in until it's fired. So that is your basic functioning of a semi-automatic gun. So this gun does not have any external safeties. However, it does have safeties. All modern produced firearms have safeties. For example, Glocks employ a safe action trigger, which is comprised of this little piece here of plastic that if you don't actually press it, it will not fire. You see I can press on all of the trigger with the exception of that middle portion and it will not fire. Additionally, there are some safeties built into the firing mechanism as well. So that is the basic components of that type of gun. This one here is a CZ75, and this one is a single action only gun. So what that means is when you pull the trigger, you're only performing one action. So right now, in the condition that it's in, If I wanted to fire the gun, I can't. There's nothing I can do about it. Cannot fire it. So in order to fire this particular firearm, we have a hammer, which is a new component that you guys haven't seen up until this point in the video. So the hammer has to be back, and then when you pull the trigger, it's doing one action, single action, dropping the hammer, then igniting the round, and then everything else in terms of function is the same as I just mentioned. You'll see here there is no place on this particular gun to mount a light or a laser, and we have an external safety on this one, so it doesn't have the trigger safety like we just showed you. So instead, in order to keep it safe, it has a thumb safety there. So generally speaking, not always, but almost always, when you see red, that's the indicator that the gun is prepared to fire. An easy way to remember it is red dead. So when you see red, it's ready to fire. When the red is covered up, generally speaking, you cannot fire. So this safety will prevent the hammer from going forward, as you guys can see there. And then when I drop the safety down, you can see the red. The gun will fire. And again, it cycles just like every other time. And as it cycles, it will bring the hammer back until you're out of rounds. Now let's talk about that actually, because I didn't talk about that earlier. When you're out of rounds, what should happen is it should lock the slide to the rear like this, letting you know that you are out of rounds and you need to get more rounds in it. So when that happens, you're going to take your magazine, insert it in there, and then there's two ways you can reload or load your firearm. I suppose if it's the first time, you can either pull back and release on a semi-automatic, and if I had bullets in there, it would work. All you do is just release like that, and the chamber will go in. Or if you have a slide stop or slide release lever, you can press that down, and that will send it home as well. Additionally, another type of firearm that we have here is a double action, single action. So this is a SIG P229 Legion, for those wondering. So in this position here, we have our hammer down, and I can pull the trigger, and it will be in what's called double action. So that means the trigger is going to do two different things. So it's going to both cock the hammer and release the hammer. So it's cocking it and releasing it. After that, again, the gun will cycle like so. And then at this point, you can see that it will be in single action, doing just the lowering of the hammer, and will function in single action until either it runs out or until you put it back down into double action, because the safe way to carry this firearm is with the hammer down. And to do that, it has a decocking lever, which is right here. It's a new part that we haven't seen yet. So that's your decocking lever. As far as I know, all double action, single action guns have that. There may be an exception to it. I don't know of one though. And this is our slide lock and slide release here on this lever. So to lock it to the rear, the same is true on all of these guns. Just gonna push up on it, and that way you can inspect the chamber, make sure it is clear, those sorts of things. And you can also practice reloading it. And again, at this point, if there was a bullet in there, we can just pull back and release and go home, or you can just release it with the lever there. And again, to carry a double action, single action, you want to decock that hammer. That thing really is essentially a sail out here on the water like that. But the last type of pistol that we want to cover here is going to be single action only, but it has a grip safety. So there will be some of these out there as well. So this is a Wilson Combat 1911 is what it's called for those who are new. And basically it's designed to be carried what's called cocked and locked, meaning the hammer is cocked to the rear and the safety is locked up. The same would be true for this type of pistol that we just talked about. However, the difference between this one, which is a very common firearm in America, is that even if I put the hammer down and I pull the trigger, nothing will happen, because this has an extra safety built into it, which is a grip safety. So this thing right here has to be depressed, meaning that you have to be grabbing the actual pistol at the time, and then the trigger will go home. Again, it will continue to cycle like that until you're out of rounds. And again, when you're done firing, it's designed to be cocked and locked, as they call it, with the safety up and the hammer back. So there is that. Now we're going to move on to revolvers. So revolvers are, I guess you would say, simpler designs. Unless you're actually doing the work on them, then they can be a little bit more confusing, just depending on the design, I suppose. So our revolver here, we have our barrel, we have our cylinder, we have our hammer, our grip, trigger. Those are basic components. You have your cylinder release here as well. Most revolvers out there on the market right now have fixed sights, meaning that the sights are not removable. You cannot interchange them, unlike most semi-automatic guns, which these sights you can actually switch out for your preference if you want to. Typically on revolvers that is not the case, however there are exceptions to that. So again, our barrel here, it's fixed, it's not going to move, nothing like that. And to check and see if it is unloaded, what you're going to want to do is, depending on the brand, so this is a Smith & Wesson Model 10, you push forward on your cylinder release on this one, and then your cylinder will come out. You can verify that there are no rounds in there, nothing up there on the barrel either. So it's unloaded, which certainly is good. And then to load it, all you would do, instead of inserting your magazine or your semi-automatic, you're just going to put your rounds right in here, just physically put them in there, and then close it up and make sure that it is locked. This particular one has an exposed hammer, meaning that you can fire it, again, either single or double action, just like the semi-automatics that we just covered. So from right here, if you were to pull the trigger, the first trigger pull will be double action, meaning the hammer's going back again and coming forward, or you can cock it, meaning pull it back and then fire in single action. Firing in single action has a much lighter trigger, and that's true on the semi-automatics as well. The double action is a little bit heavier. Some people would say that it's a little bit safer in double action. Regardless, if you're going to carry this gun or stage it or any of those sorts of things, it's designed to be left in the ready condition, i.e. with the rounds in the cylinder with the hammer down. It's not designed to be left with the hammer to the rear. So we have a different one here. This is the Ruger LCR. This is, I believe, their X. Regardless, this one's a little bit different in that we have a push button release for the cylinder. Otherwise, it's pretty darn similar. You can actually replace the sights on this one though, which I know some folks do like. Both of these revolvers do have exposed hammers. However, there are plenty of revolvers, really probably most of them that new shooters would be looking at, that have no exposed hammer. The hammer is actually inside the frame on the actual gun itself. Now, one thing to point out here that I didn't point out is that every brand has they're about 50-50, I guess, in terms of which way the cylinder rotates when it fires. So if you guys can see here, this one here is rotating this way. So the next round that will actually go down the barrel is the one that's right here. So if you're going to manually do it, pull the hammer back, it sets that cylinder right there where a bullet would be aligned with the barrel, and then when you press the trigger, it would go straight out of there. Now, one thing we'll talk about here a little bit later on is you want to make sure you don't burn yourself, but again, we'll get to that later on. But that's the basic function of a revolver. Simpler design from the end user's perspective, for sure. So that is how revolvers function. So when you get your gun in, like you just got home from the gun shop, what do I recommend you do? So I recommend 100% check out your manual, read your manual, and read basically the function of the gun like we just talked about. They're all a little bit different, and learn how to disassemble your firearm because that will obviously give you a better understanding of how it works. And guns are designed to be clean and lubricated to fire optimally, I guess you could say. So they're all a little bit different in terms of how you take them down. If you're unsure after looking at your manual, absolutely check out YouTube. It's a great resource that exists now. I have like 100 different videos on how to clean and lubricate a gun. So if you're looking for my particular video, just type in the Mrgunsngear channel, how to clean and lubricate a 1911, for example, if that's what you have, or a Glock, or whatever the case may be. And I will walk you through it step by step on how to do it. But it's good to do, number one, because that's how the gun's designed to be used, in a clean and lubricated condition. And it just makes you more familiar with your gun as well, which is also a very good. What do I recommend for clean and lubricate? If you watch any of my videos, you'll see links down below in the video description to pick up the stuff I'm using. However, a lot of your guns will come with some cleaning supplies as well, so check your box or check the little nylon thing that some guns come in for any type of cleaning instruments, so you don't have to buy them. However, as a basic rule of thumb, a oil, like petroleum-based lubricant is what you want to look for. There are some folks who say other things, that's fine. But the one I recommend is CLP. It's been working for the military for decades. It stands for cleaning, cleaner lubricant and protective or a cleaner lubricant and preservative, depending on the actual formula. Regardless, it all does the same thing. It does all of the functions that you need to do, and it works. If you don't have access to any of that right now, motor oil works in a pinch. So it's not my recommendation, but it does work better than a dry gun, that's for sure. So basically, at this point, we've gotten familiar with our new firearm. What are some things I recommend? So number one, we want to learn how to grip our firearm. It's very important, not only because you want to be safe about it, but you also want to have to build good habits, right? So I have videos on how to grip a pistol and why and all that stuff. Real quick thing that will apply to basically all firearms that I can think of is that you want to be as high as possible on the gun. The reason for that, guys, is that as we fire, again, the slide here is going to be back and forward, and you want to have as much control of the gun and keep it as flat as possible when you're firing. And if you're down here on the gun, you simply don't have the leverage, and the gun is just going to do that more. And what a lot of new shooters don't know is that if you don't hold the gun firmly enough and high enough, it can cause a malfunction, and a malfunction means that the next round won't load properly, or the round in the gun will not come out as you want it to. So there's lots of videos on how to fix that. It's not what I want to get into, but it can cause a malfunction because the guns, semi-autos like this one, or all of them actually, are designed to have a certain amount of pressure on them as the spring that's in there goes back and then goes forward. So if you don't have the right amount of pressure on there, it can cause an issue. So your grip is very important to that. So you want to be as high as possible on the gun, and then basically you want to have maximum contact with the gun. So for semi-automatic pistols, what I recommend people do is exactly what you see here. As high as possible, keep this thumb high, and then come in, make an L with your offhand. It's the same as true if you are a left-handed shooter, there's no difference. And you want to fill this void right here. So that way, again, maximum contact with the gun, and you're nice and high, thumbs forward, pointing at the target. Again, guys, I have a fully dedicated video to that topic, but that is going to hold true regardless of the type of gun that you have here. The same would be true on this one. High as possible, maximum leverage on the firearm. Now with revolvers, we have an additional thing to think about with revolvers because when you fire, there's a little gap here. It's called the cylinder gap. Again, guys, this is the cylinder right here. And then we have a forcing cone, which is basically the portion of the barrel. It's the way you can think of it. It's not the exact gun nerd way to explain it, but for the layman, it's the portion of the barrel that comes out and comes as close as possible to the cylinder. It's where the bullet first enters the barrel. So there's a little bit of a gap there called the cylinder gap. So when you fire, there's going to be a lot of hot gases and propellants, the things that push the bullet forward, that are going to come out there and leak out of there. So with a revolver, if you come up and try to do that, your thumb could get burned if you have smaller calibers like 38 Special, stuff like that. However, with Magnum calibers, it can cut your hand or even remove portions of it. So we don't want to do that. So our grip's going to be a little bit different. There's different techniques on this. Definitely watch guys like Jerry Miculek and other experts in revolvers. Again, we want to be as high as possible though, regardless. So on this particular gun, we're as high as possible right up here, and then fill in as much as we can on it. But again, with a revolver, you kind of got to put your thumb down. Some people will do that. Okay, practice it, do what you want, basically with the thumb over, and some folks will kind of tuck it under there and do that. I've seen people do this. No one I know really recommends that, and the reason for it is you guys can see there is a gap there, so we're losing pressure on the gun. Again, we want to have leverage on that gun and cover up as much of the surface as possible, but not get your thumb forward. So work with either technique, and practice, see what you like, see what you prefer. And I should note on that too, for semi-automatics, something I see a lot of new shooters do really wrong is they'll take their hand and go like that. So the problem with that is, number one, you don't have leverage here on the gun. That's problematic, but more problematic is that as soon as you go to fire your gun, the slide's going to come back and you're going to get a malfunction because it's going to hit your hand. Doesn't really hurt if you've ever done it. It's not going to take your finger off or anything like that, but your gun won't cycle. And then when you go to pull the cycle, meaning the slide going all the way back and all the way forward. So when you go to pull the trigger next, it's not going to work, right? So that's a problem. We don't want to do that. So again, keep your thumb out of there. Don't be wrapping anything around like that. It's simply just not recommended. So up here I have it's labeled rather dry fire. So once we make sure that our gun is unloaded, we want to visually inspect that there is no round in there, and you can double check by putting your finger in there as well. Make sure there's no magazine in there, and basically we're just going to practice what it's like and simulate firing without rounds. Now up here I have practicality listed, and that's for the reason that we're going to get to right now. So one of the rules is going to be don't point your firearm at something you don't intend to destroy or kill or whatever the case may be. Well, there's a bush right here. I don't intend to kill it or destroy it. And I also am going to put my finger on the trigger for dry fire practice. So there's practicality with your treating your gun as if it's always loaded. So my rule, and everybody can have their own opinion on this, is fine. You can always, every time you do it, double check, and that's fine. What I do is I keep my ammo completely separate, magazines completely separate, and once I clear a gun, i.e. I look in there, I make sure it's cleared, it's clear until I let it out of my hands. If I put it down, go get some water, come back, I re-clear it. You never know what could happen. It's really easy to make a mental mistake. That's what I do. It's worked for me over the years. Do as you see fit. But for dry firing, essentially you're practicing your grip, which is nice, you get that. So again, practice high up, make your L, come in for a semi-auto. I'm gonna point in a safe direction and press the trigger. And what we're focused on there is our sight picture. So every sight system is a little bit different, but on pistols and revolvers, they're gonna be a version of something like this. So what you want is equal space between your rear sight here. So you don't want your front sight to be all the way over one way or another. You want equal space, and then your target beyond it. And you don't want it to be like this, and you don't want it to be like this. You want it to be level, something like that. Hopefully I'm rolling in better pictures that you guys can see. And it doesn't matter if you have 3 dots, 2 dots, no dots. If you have just your revolver like this that has a built-in ramp and front sight there, the ramp is the ramp up here rather, and your rear sight milled in. What you want is when you're pressing that trigger, you want to pull it straight to the rear and make sure that you're causing as minimal movement on that front and rear sight as possible, and that you stay locked in there. And again, the same is true for your pistol as well as revolver. There's really no difference there. And for those wondering, with revolvers, one thing you can do is you can clear it by actually looking in the chamber. So going back to my rule of knowing how it's clear, however, if you're not comfortable with that, that's fine. Pull it out and just visually make sure that we are clear. So with dry fire practice, guys, what you're focusing on is how you feel, how the trigger feels as you're pressing it back, keeping those sights steady on the target. I recommend picking an inanimate object around the room, whether it be a doorknob. That's kind of what I use, just kind of my default. There's lots of videos on dry fire technique. It's not really what I want to get into, but I do want you guys to dry fire before you go out and practice. Just get used to the way that gun feels. If you have like a single action gun or a double action single action, what you can do is between each shot, so you point and press and just cycle the slide, meaning pull back on the slide, let it go all the way home. A note on that, another mistake a lot of new shooters make is they will pull the slide back and ride it home. The spring tension, there's a spring in here, guys, and that spring has a very specific weight to it. That weight is designed to pick up a round out of the magazine and force it into the barrel in the chamber, okay? So what you want to do whenever you run a slide, I don't think there's an exception to this outside of trying to lock it to the rear. Whenever you run a slide, run it. Just let it go. It's designed to work that way. So that way you can practice your trigger press like that. If you have a double action, single action gun, like our SIG 228 here that we showed you earlier, again, you can practice the function there. So you can practice some shots in double action, because your first shot is always going to be double action. Focus on the front, on the sights rather, making sure everything stays line. Practice some in single action, practice some one-handed, two-handed, just get a feel for that firearm. All right, so ammunition selection. So for a new shooter, this is actually somewhat intimidating. So there are, let's just say, I think all of these pistols, the handguns out here are all, no, they're not. Okay, so they're not all 9mm. This one, this 1911 here is chambered in 45 ACP, but the rest are chambered in 9mm Luger or 9mm Parabellum. Those are the same as is 9x19. All three of those listings that I just said are safe to put in your 9mm. Again, check out your owner's manual. It will tell you. Almost all firearms are also marked on the slide and on the barrel. This one is marked 9x19 on both of those. But 9x19, 9mm Luger, 9mm Parabellum are all the same. However, there are different ones out there. There's 9x18 that you guys will see out there. There's 9x17, which is also 380 ACP. There's 9x21, etc. So check out your owner's manual and make sure you're getting the right ammo for your gun for safety, number one, because guns can blow up if you put the wrong stuff in there. And when I say blow up, it's not like an explosion, but they'll bulge out and you can be hurt by it. So you want to make sure you have the right ammo for your gun. And with revolvers in particular, revolvers, there's a lot of them that can fire multiple rounds. This one here is a 38 special chambering. However, if you look around, you'll see again things that can confuse you. There's 38 super, which don't put in this gun. There's 38 shorts. There are some revolvers that will say on them 357 Magnum and 38 Special. This particular one just says 38 Special because it's only chambered for 38 Special. However, a 357 Magnum is essentially a larger, more powerful version of that. So revolvers that are made for that can also shoot the less powerful version. So I can't go into all of them here in this video, guys, but again, check your owner's manual to see what is safe to fire through your gun and make sure you're putting the right ammo into it so that way you stay safe on that. So correct caliber, check on that for sure. And then practice versus self-defense ammo. I do have ammo out here. So this is a full metal jacket round here. You guys can see there. Those are generally going to be less expensive. However, they are also not designed for defensive use. Yes, they absolutely will kill people. Yes, they're absolutely dangerous and you absolutely should respect them. All of those sorts of things. However, it will just push in this case, 9mm. It will just push a 9mm hole through your target and you can't really expect any more tissue damage than that. And I realize this may sound morbid, but the reality of it, guys, is if you're using a firearm in self-defense or home defense, what you're trying to do ultimately is stop the threat that is present in your life right now to your life or your family's life or your loved one's life. So you want maximum tissue disruption. That's what you want because that is going to give you the best chance to stay alive and keep your family alive. Okay, so these are not what you want for that. With pistols, you want and revolvers, you want something that will expand. So typically you'll see either hollow point, jacketed hollow point, bonded hollow point, any of those, they will all expand. And those are more expensive. So with the practice stuff, definitely just stick with the full metal jackets to build your skill set and build your familiarity. But when you decide on what to use in terms of a defensive load or a hollow point load, there's lots of research out there about what's good, what's not good. That's a video for another day. I have lots of gel tests that you guys can see, ballistic gelatin, if you want to see how these bullets behave. Buy some of that ammo that you are going to use for defensive purposes and verify that it works in your gun. The reason I say that is some guns don't like certain ammo. It's just what it is. So there's no set rule, in my opinion, of how much of it you have to put through it. Some folks will say a box, some folks will say 100 rounds. There's lots of opinions on the internet. You can take them for what they're worth, and everybody's got an opinion. But I would say, put some through it just to make sure, at least the magazine through, to make sure it will actually function reliably in your gun. The more you can put through it, the better. But I realize some folks may be on a limited budget, so I highly advise you put some through it for sure before depending on it to save your life. So that's ammunition, a quick overview. And then accessories. So with either a revolver or a pistol, again, if you're going to use them for defensive purposes, I highly recommend you store them with a round in the chamber. Some people aren't comfortable with that. It's okay. But believing that in the moment that there is a life-threatening person or entity in front of you, your nerve levels are going to skyrocket. There's all kinds of biological things that are going to happen to your body, and remembering to rack that slide isn't a guarantee. However, it's pretty natural to pick up a gun and pull a trigger. A lot of people have done it. There's a lot of 80-year-old grandmas out there that have successfully defended themselves against like home invaders and stuff like that. It's totally doable. You can do it. You can operate a gun with a round in the chamber. Now, even if your gun has an external safety on it, I highly recommend you get a holster for it. I would say that, well, I wouldn't say that. I will say rather, there's no loaded guns, no loaded handguns in my house that are not in a holster. And the reason for that is the trigger, it's just too easy to get hit. Let's say you leave a pistol on your nightstand, for example, you put your cup of water down, it actually accidentally is on the edge, it spills over, and you reach and grab and try to grab the cup as it falls over. Well, triggers can get hit really easily like that. So you want something that covers your trigger at all times. And again, probably the majority of the guns that new shooters are getting don't have external safety. So it'll be something like this, like our Glock firearm here. And all you need to do is reach in there real quick and snatch it, and that trigger will cause the gun to go off. So you want something that covers the trigger guard. So this here is a DeSantis, excuse me, a Safariland holster, but there are so many holsters out there. It's mind-boggling these days, which is great. It's excellent. So even for storing it, even if you're not carrying the gun on your body, you want a holster. Now, there are other things out there that are perfectly fine. I know there are like fanny pack holsters and stuff. If you want to store it in that, it's cool, whatever. I'm good with it. If you want to store it in like a quick access safe, I'm good with it. You just want that trigger guard covered, okay? These are excellent. This is a retention holster. I don't want to go too deep into holsters, but so I can pull as hard as I want on this and the gun will not come out unless I press this little lever here with my thumb. The Safariland holsters are fantastic. If you want retention holsters, I'll drop a link down below, but these are fantastic. They make them for most common guns. Highly, highly recommend this system. It's very safe. There's no buttons that are near the trigger guard that you can accidentally press your trigger while you're trying to press that instead. Trust me, those holsters are out there for the new folks, so really good. It doesn't have to have retention though, really anything. Again, leather, Kydex, whatever the case may be, that covers your trigger guard. It meets the requirement, in my opinion, for safe storage. And we want to be safe, obviously. So other things to look at, especially for your semi-automatic gun, is a light. So the reason I say that is a high percentage of shootings that happen for civilians happen in low light conditions. So a light mounted up on your gun, or it can be a flashlight as well. You can have one by your nightstand or wherever you keep your gun, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. However, most people are going to shoot better with weapon-mounted lights. Now, we want to make sure that we're not just using our weapon-mounted light as an everyday flashlight, or we're not using it just to like search for a magnet that fell on the floor or something like that. It's a serious item. Again, we want to treat it seriously. So, but having a light on your gun allows you to operate it easier. You can use it very briefly, illuminate something to see if there's something there, if there's a threat there, to see if the person that just came in your house is a violent felon intent on killing or raping or harming you, or is your drunk cousin who just barged through the door and forgot to text you first, right? So it's incumbent upon us, the law-abiding gun owners, to know what we're engaging and who we're engaging in, that it actually is a threat and is deserving of being given some lethal force. So in my opinion, weapon-mounted lights are absolutely the way to go. But if you don't have one, you can use a regular flashlight. There's different techniques for how you can hold it and operate it. But I'm telling you guys, for inexperienced shooters, very, very difficult to get reliable hits like that. It's difficult for experienced shooters to do so. So along those lines, I recommend a weapon-mounted light if you can do so. There's many out there. There's many good ones. I have a whole sub-playlist on my channel here that you can see of weapon lights. The two that I kind of just always recommend because they're good are the Streamlight TLR series, whether it be a I got it that time. Whether it be a TLR 1, 2, 7, or 8, all of those are good, and anything Surefire's putting out as well is very good. There's a little bit of a price difference there. Again, check out my videos on them. It will go through all the details on that. So eye protection and hearing protection. I didn't bring out any eye protection, did I? Oh well. Regardless, for eye protection, guys, what you want is something with a Z87 safety rating, meaning that it's impact resistant. There's any number of things that can go wrong when firing firearms, whether you're just standing next to somebody who's firing one and you're not firing and a piece of brass comes in and could go in your eye and cause serious damage to, like I said, you load the wrong caliber in your gun and all of a sudden pieces of your gun are coming at you. You want eye protection. You're shooting steel, whatever the case may be. Sometimes bullet fragments can come off of things. If you're out shooting rocks in a ravine, bullet fragments can come off. Eye protection is paramount. And then ear protection, there's so many different options there, but you can go with the good old standard foam inserts, which those are really good. They work, they're fine, as long as you properly insert them. I have a video on how to properly insert them for those of you guys who don't know, because I didn't know when I started. Or you can use something that is an over-the-ear product. It can be active, meaning that, like these ones here, they have these little speaker microphones on them. Excuse me, microphones, not speak. Yes, microphones, not speakers. These are actually taking the sound that's coming in when you turn it on, and it amplifies the sound so you can actually hear better with these on than without them. But anything that's above 85 decibels, which a gunshot is really loud, anything that's above that will get cut out, so it'll protect the loud noises but allow you to hear the other noises really well. They also make some of these that are passive, and those are really inexpensive. Walker's, like the same brand as these, makes good ones, and Peltor makes really good ones as well, 3M. All of those are really good to go. So that way, when you're shooting and practicing, your ears won't hurt. It's a more comfortable experience. For new shooters, I recommend both. Guns are really loud, and for people who get scared by that, it helps to calm their nerves to have both hearing protection in, both the plugs and the muffs. It just makes the sensory experience of shooting a little bit easier to handle for somebody who's new. So that is my basics, guys. Super basic. Every one of these topics I could do an hour-long video on. That's not an exaggeration, but those are the basic things to know if you are a brand new shooter and you just picked up your first gun, you didn't grow up around guns, and you know nothing about them. Hopefully this will help you. If you are somebody who's very experienced with firearms and you know somebody who just got a new gun, share this video with them, please, if you think the information's helpful. We want to keep everyone as safe as possible, and we want more gun owners out there in the community who are not intimidated by owning a gun, right? So if you're thinking about getting a gun, hopefully you watch this and now you're like, oh, it's not that hard. There's a few safety things to figure out. There's a few different topics to go over rather, but I think I can do this. It's not that hard, and as long as you're a responsible person, you can have lots of fun and get the safety that having firearms has, really, which there's not really anything else that can give you that equality, right? So that's one of the beauties of firearms, is that a 90-year-old elderly woman versus a 200-pound, 25-year-old man, if she's got a gun, she's got a chance. If she doesn't, she doesn't. So there is that. Additionally, kind of a note on the end, right now, again, this could be different in the future. A lot of the new gunners that we're getting into our community it's because of a panic and a crisis. A lot of them formerly were either kind of on the fence about gun rights or anti-gun, and then they realized that the government will not protect them when needed. And that's true regardless of the pandemic or not. Somebody kicks your door in, if you call the police, they're at best a minute or more out, but it's seconds that count in that type of situation, and the government, whether it be law enforcement or whatever the case may be, is not going to save you. So remember that if you were anti-gun before, in terms of your sort of view on the topic, hopefully you've changed that view and you will vote accordingly now that you're a member of our community, and realize that there's a lot of people that want to take these rights away from us. That's a fundamental right to defend ourselves. So I don't want to go on a whole diatribe about that, but please think that through if you're somebody who just made that decision, and continue on with that. Don't let whatever fear situation created you, whether it's your ex-boyfriend who just threatened you and you decided to go out and buy a gun, don't let that fear situation subside in the future and then think it's okay to take away guns, because there's going to be another panic moment for somebody out there, some law-abiding American, whether it's a natural disaster or a personal threat, whatever the case may be, and you want the ability to get that gun in your hands for your safety and your family's safety as soon as possible. So that is pretty much it, guys. This video is probably long enough, but regardless, thank you all for watching. I truly appreciate it. If you're not subscribed, you like this type of video, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, and I look forward to seeing all of you new guys in the next video.